with Zulip, what I would like, I mean, Axel and I worked on this and he's got it set up nicely now, I think, is we don't have very many posts in Zulip. And I'd like it to be installed on your phone or something that you use every day. If you use your laptop every day or whatever, so that you see the notifications, because it's it's supposed to be our main form of communication for the team. So if we post things in the homework channel, people are missing those sometimes also. So it's hard to make progress cohesively if only half of the team is seeing the messages. And that's going to be more important as we get closer to the competition. We're going to be saying, hey, who can meet Tuesday evening? And if we only, Dan and I can't be chasing people down and sending out text messages that say, did you see the thing in Zulip? That's just dumb, right? So we need you guys to step up and do whatever you need to do to make sure you're seeing those notifications. I know this is more than Dan asked for, but that's my opinion on it. That's our communication hub. You have to see the notifications. Okay. So if you need help getting that set up, we're happy to help you. Axel has figured this out. He's worked on it recently. There were some gotchas, I think.
It's just a single setting.
Yeah, it's a single setting on you were using the phone app, right, Axel?
Yes.
Yeah, so in the phone app, it's a single setting. I use the desktop app because I'm on my laptop all day for work, but I was already getting all the notifications on my desktop. So Axel, maybe you could just put something out in Zulip because everybody uses Zulip.
Yeah.
That's our communication hub. So
I can put out a little guide for that.
Yeah, that would be great. And we need to get everybody on there. And sorry, I've been slacking and not playing the benevolent dictator on this earlier. We really need to use it. So anything else? Dan, you said you had a couple housekeeping. Did we do both of them?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I somehow managed to minimize it and then it wouldn't come back up. So sorry. Yes.
Yeah, that's crazy with Zoom. It's just I'm just now, after years of using it at work, figuring out most of the ways to find it, or to get it out of the way. But it does, its value proposition is so good for the things it does that just everybody, just lots of places use it, right?
That's true.
All right. Now what? I guess we have to do this other stuff. So given that I put it in Zulip, how many people saw the script I posted in GitHub? Show of voices? Anybody? Professor Brainstorm? No. Axel?
Yes.
All right. Michael Tice?
Hi. Yes.
Was that yes? That was
Yes.
an I. Talk like a pirate day, huh?
Hi.
All right. Dan, I don't want to leave you out. Did you look at my PowerShell script?
I wouldn't have known what I was looking at, but no, I did not.
Oh,
Sorry.
sometimes I don't. I just get my 1,000 monkeys out and I post the one that looks good. So
I have a small confusion here.
excellent. Yeah.
You
want to share your screen?
I'm on Wayland. I haven't figured out how to do that yet.
Oh, you're in a browser, right?
No.
You can open Zoom in a browser.
That's not the issue.
Okay, go for it. Sorry.
So on line 2, it says backtick N.
Yeah.
I'm presuming that means that's an escape for a new line, but why
It
backtick?
Why backtick? Well, backtick, I don't know why they chose backtick. not every language has the same escape character, but most of them use the C style backslash. The only other place I can think of that has an interesting use of backtick is most of the Unix/Linux shells, where instead of doing, let's say you want to see the details of your bash file, you can do that and say, I don't know where bash is, but show me the ls for it, right? So you say which bash, which will tell you where it is, and then you feed that to ls, right? Well, instead of that, you can use backticks, but this is really sneaky. It's really easy to make mistakes. It's harder to see, that's the old school way to do it, which is kind of a way to escape into and this creates either one of these creates a subshell. So you spawn a different process.
That doesn't seem to be working for me.
It's not the same thing. Which doesn't, the PowerShell stuff or the
command you just showed with the backticks and the which bash.
This one? This is in,
yeah.
So are you in Fish? By any chance?
Oh, that could be the.
Oops.
All right.
Yeah, let's see. Oh, sorry. I thought I had some of the other shells installed.
Yeah, that works. Sorry, wrong shell.
Okay. So yeah, I tried to stay away from that, but I'll pull this up. I didn't realize. Here, I'm just gonna close. Can I close all of these? I guess I want to leave this one up. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. This is the one. Okay. So Axel's little bit of confusion is right there. And in PowerShell, I hadn't meant to leave a lot of these in. I wonder how many I did leave in. Just the one. I only missed one. It was just a discussion I didn't think we needed to get into today, but Axel guessed correctly. In PowerShell strings, instead of using backslash to escape a character like in Linux, we didn't talk about this too much, but backslash n is a new line, backslash t is a tab, backslash r is a carriage return. So there's all these non-printable, well, they're printable, all these characters that are difficult to enter from the keyboard, or they might present challenges in a script if you embed them in the script or whatever. And so they have these special escape sequences that you can use. And PowerShell uses a backtick instead of a backslash for reasons I don't know. The authors of PowerShell are pretty active online, and I bet there's an explanation someplace. Don't know why, but so this one just means grab this, is that it's going to print in 2 lines, right? And it means also that this doesn't have a value when I'm at the interactive shell. Welcome to, sounds like I'm hitting Mashburger again. So this was my port of our bash script to PowerShell. I think the bash script was 150 lines, did we decide? Was that the ish? Let's take a look here.
Sorry, one more question.
Yeah, go for it.
Why do you return hex dead beef?
Because I like that code. Yeah, so
all right.
Yeah, there are, you can spell letters with the hex codes, and it didn't matter what I returned. And so I just wondered if anybody would notice, basically. So well done. And what Axel's talking about here is when there's this is one of these else clauses that should never be reached. So I quoted Liam Neeson from the movie, what's the one where they kidnap his daughter and he says basically, I'm gonna come find you and kill you. Except I modified it a little bit to say I'm gonna come kill your process. You shouldn't be in my shell. And then I said sincerely your mom at the end because that's what we do. So I put a long a long message at the end, but and then I returned error code dead beef. I haven't been able to trigger this one yet, which is interesting because I was able to trigger the one in Bash, the equivalent one in Bash pretty easily. So there's some ways because PowerShell is more like a normal language in a lot of ways, it can tend to be safer from that point of view. So let's get back out here. What was I gonna say? I was just gonna show it to you, I think. Dang it, Zoom. Hang on. What would a recording be without the words dang it, Zoom? Okay, so it should look fairly similar. I need to redo this. I love how the prompts always put a colon in there, like you're not capable of punctuating your own prompts. Oh, and there aren't very many files in this directory. Let me change to the same directory we were in before so that we can kind of get similar output. Why not? Because that's on the other, it's on the other video. So I'm gonna have to go to, now this is a little goofy. I'm gonna have to go to WSL OpenHost, and that gets me into the local Ubuntu system. And I have to go to this Ubuntu 20.04 that's listed on this tab. That'll get me into the right Linux system. And then I think it was the temp directory. And hopefully those files are still there. And then, can I make a link from here? Let's try this. I want to make a symbolic link that references. Now I have to go back to the other file system. This is kind of painful. So to go back to Windows, I say MNT mount or MNTC user. Oh, it's not liking that. What am I doing wrong? Oh, wait, I'm in Windows, my bad. So I just have to say users, Chris, documents, Git, GitHub, SQL Sys, CDC, source, that one. Oh, I didn't give it a name. So I want to say, I have to do this the PowerShell way, which would be, there's a couple ways to do this. I'll say the type I want is a symbolic link. And that is my target. And the path I want is, we'll just say get filtered files here. I think that'll work. Uh-oh. Oh, shoot, because I'm in. This will be easier. I can't put something in the Linux file system. That's the problem. So this will be its value. Let's make an alias. Aliases can say whatever they want to be. Say whatever they want to. So that's the value. This is the name. That should work. Okay. So now I know I didn't narrate that very well, but I'm back in that temp directory I used in the previous video, and I should be able to get similar results depending on how much the content of this has changed. I think last time I was using txt as my filter. And so if I look at the file name, yeah, this looks about the same. Sorting by file name, you'll notice it's a little different because Windows by default is case insensitive. So you remember in Linux, this capital T came up before the lowercase a because Linux was case sensitive. So Windows will sort this according to its own collation. Trivia, you can make Windows case sensitive. You can make NTFS case sensitive. Not always recommended. Rarely recommended. We'll say we want to
Can you
do
make
this
Linux? Can you make Linux case insensitive?
Don't know.
I wouldn't recommend it.
Probably a bad idea. So we'll do the same thing we did before. We'll just rifle through the three options. Oh, no, we won't. Oh, yes, we will. Okay, file name length. And this is the one where you can tell just by following the dots, and you can see we've got 3 is right for text. And then we've got some that are 2 longer, so they should be 5, and they are. 2 longer is 7, 3 longer is 10, 2 more is 12, and we'll just kind of trust it from there on out. Whoops. So we want to go one more time for TXT. Do the vowel counts. 0s are the easy one. That looks right. Then we get 1 in abc.text, and these are a lot easier to count. So we'll go down to like unfreeze.text, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's what we get. So this looks right. Now, the cool thing about this is that I didn't have to do nearly as hard a work to get this to happen. At least the formatting. Remember, I had to use that column command. I didn't set this up so that it'll pipe output. Maybe I should have done that. But at this point in the command where I'm outputting this information, all I'm doing is showing an object. The object has these 3 fields: name, name length, and name vowel count. And I just say, just put that on the screen. I don't have to worry about it. PowerShell goes ahead and puts it in columns for me. Oh, that's a lot easier. So I think with the other script, we went ahead and tried, edge cases. I did go ahead and trap the empty string, but this time I just said, yeah, you can't put it in at all. Dot works the same way, it shows everything. Star works the same way, it shows everything. So pretty much the functionality looks a lot like the one in Linux. It's just a question of how did we do it, right? And let's see. Well, I did mention it's a little more concise. This is the bash version. So this is like 147 lines of code. That's a very rough, right? I don't care exactly. And then this one, including the comments, is basically 88. So this one probably works out to more like 80. That's very close to half as long, right? And it was easier to write. So when you hear that kind of talk, easier to write, less code, you're basically looking at a higher level language, right? High level languages allow you to say things like, let's see, where's a good example here of a high level? Well, switch is kind of a high level construct. I mean, we've got something like that in bash. What makes this higher level? It's not like we don't have this stuff in bash. But somehow PowerShell works out. I mean, I mentioned this to my son Gabe too, about how I wanted to do bash first because PowerShell was going to be more expressive. And he concurred. He's like, oh yeah, PowerShell can express a lot compared to bash in the same amount of code. And now I'm looking at it and I'm saying, why is that? But and I don't have an answer. But
I think
let's go ahead.
the
Yeah.
so I think it's the complexity of the commands you can run,
Mhm.
and then it's also that it's object oriented rather than data oriented.
Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think you might be onto something because I never had to do I never had to include something like that where I had to format the columns or I didn't have to put headers on anything and I didn't have to put them into columns manually, right? And
Mhm.
in my book for Bash, this was elegant. This worked out well, right? Remember I said, oh, I only had to do this sort command. You're probably looking at it. No, you had to do all that, you know. So yeah, it's a better looking language, that's for sure. So anyway, let's just kind of walk through this, okay? You'll remember me saying that there's always verb, noun, you know, syntax to these commandlets. And they are called commandlets, these ones that go verb, noun, and well, you can have functions too, all right? So if you look at, hang on a sec. Remember we emphasized the discoverability, right, of PowerShell? And we'll go meta here. Get me information about get command. And you can see that there's a command type here, and this one's a commandlet. Um, let me muck up a command on purpose. There's no command type that's called that. I'm hoping it'll give me the enum, which you know, the list of correct choices. And these are the choices. Alias, we've seen that. You just give it a name and say you want something else substituted. Function, functions should have the same verb noun format to the name. The only difference is they return something, right? Filter, we're not going to worry about. Commandlet is sort of the normal thing. External script is exactly, well, maybe not exactly what it sounds like, but that's when you run a file. So there's a file with some code in it and you run that. Application is, you know, like an exe or something like this. A script is a script that PowerShell has ingested. So the difference between an external script, I might write this and call the script directly. This is a script that PowerShell knows about because it's part of a package or something. Very little different. We're not going to talk about configurations. I have no idea. Oh, all is just a keyword that says, I think it means I don't care what the command type is or something, but so there aren't that many different types. That's the point. The ones we might work with are alias, function, commandlet. You know, we may write scripts. In fact, that's what my solution is, right? It's a script. And of course, applications are right. If we run any program that's not part of PowerShell, we'll be running an application. So basically, you know, that's it for us. So write output just means that you want to write, but it's a little, there's a little bit more to it than just writing. There are all these different commandlets for writing, and they all have specific uses. And you'll notice here that there's a write output. That's the one we're looking at. And there's a write error. And those should sound familiar if you've done C programming or if you know enough about or recall enough about Linux scripting, that they have standard in, standard out, and standard error, STD error, right? And so these are the equivalent for PowerShell to write to standard out and standard error. They don't give you, as far as I know, a sneaky way to write to standard in like Bash does, where you can go and write to the TTY, because it's, you know, a more protected kind of platform. But there's also this where you can write to debug. They built that in. Write to the host, which means you write to the console. Well, that's kind of a way. So this is how you write to the host, write to the screen. There's an info, a way to write info messages, a way to write to like a progress bar, verbose and warning. So I wonder if I'm going to have to guess at something here. Hang on. Rats. Hey, found it. So whereas Linux has standard in, standard out, and standard error, these 7 streams are all official streams in PowerShell. So these are just the output streams. There's also standard in. So they have a success stream. That's one. That's like standard out. They have an error stream, a warning stream, a verbose stream, a debug info, and a progress stream. Progress doesn't have a number. You just write to the right progress commandlet. And that's why they have these specifically named commandlets. They each write to the stream that has the same name, basically. Okay. So if you don't have a reason to write to one of these specific streams, you should use write output. And if you're following along in my mind and reading, my vibes telepathically, there's a reason I'm belaboring this point. And the reason is that people tend to want to use write host. Let's go back to this one. They'll tend to want to use this one because they're using a host, right? If you use write host, hang on. I think write host, I don't think you can do it like this. Oh, you can. Okay. So they'll want to use write host. And there's good reasons for this. I think you can say like background color, red. And so there's things you can do here, which are good if you're actually writing to a host. Let's make this nice and ugly. There. So you can do things like that. If you're actually writing to a host, a terminal, right? This is the thing to do. There's also another set of commandlets. These guys. And people will want to use outhost. And for out, these are the ones you can't just say outhost ABC because these are, you stream to these. Okay, so you have to send piped output. So you can say ABC and then you can pipe it to outhost, right? And people like to do that. And this one is a bad idea, usually. Can you do foreground? You can't even do foreground colors. What you want to do here is out default, almost always. And the reason that you want to do almost, unless you, remember when I said, unless you have a reason to write to one of the other streams, the reason you want to use write output or out default is that sometimes somebody's going to take your commandlet or your script or whatever you wrote, and they're going to pipe it to something else, right? So let's suppose I have a function that's called write this. This is a abuse of the write dash verb noun, but we'll just live with it for right now. And it takes a commandlet this, or it takes a parameter this, and it's going to do something with it. So let's say that it's going to take this and it's going to pipe it to out default. So this is one of those really dumb things, right? So I can take ABC and I can pipe it to out default. I'm sorry, my bad. I can say write this, and then I can send it ABC, and it'll just pipe it through out default, right? No problem. So I can take this and I can pipe that for whatever reason I would want to. I could pipe it to, well, it doesn't really matter. I can pipe it to write host. Let's do that. And say that I want the foreground color, oops, to be red. Oops, why didn't that work? I don't know. This is where I get confused. That's why I don't do code you can see.
Is red a color?
Yeah, because if I didn't use one, it would complain, right?
All right.
It makes me wonder, what is my thing outputting? Get member. Oh, hang on. Out default. Out file, out grid, out host. Because I'm writing to the host. Oh, I just realized I'm going to have a hard time demonstrating what I want to show. Let me just try to explain this. I've never tried to do this as a demo before, and I thought I was doing so well. Let's see, I just want to see what happens if I try this real quickly, okay? Okay, so I'm going to do this for each object. And this, so this, we'll talk about this, but this is meaning that for everything that gets sent through this pipe, I want to do something with it. And the strange way you pick up the object is this is its placeholder. Okay. It means the thing, basically. It has a special name, but I don't remember what it is. But so for everything that gets pumped through this pipe, for each of those objects, I want to write output that thing. Let's see, the ABC is cool. Very cool indeed. And what I'm not sure about is what we'll get right there. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to demo.
I think you need to specify a parameter for each object. Is that?
No,
Yeah, you need a object.
nope.
You need a variable in object
No, I don't.
in your for each.
I just,
Really?
well, this is the variable. So I just did this with I just passed ABC to it, and it printed ABC, very cool indeed. Right? But when I change it to my function, the function prints, but nothing happens on the other side of the pipe.
Isn't this exactly why you were saying not to use write host?
Yes, exactly. This is why I was saying don't use write host. Do, 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 do. So some of these, and this I guess it happens without default too, but some of these outputs they write things to a different stream, and the pipe will only put only some of the streams go through, right? So if I change my function, I think I misspoke because my function uses out default, doesn't it? Where'd it go? Hang on. This is weird, but it's the easiest way to see it. So it does use out default. I kind of thought this would work. But so if I change my function, I've demonstrated what I want to demonstrate, but I'm just not sure if I got lucky. There we go. So write output always writes it to the correct stream for it to be piped to the next command. Maybe none of the out commands will do that properly. Maybe out means it's going out of the stream altogether. But this is what you want to use. If you want to send something down the pipeline, you use write output. And so that's why I'm belaboring this point. It's just one of these gotchas that gets everybody. Eventually, they try to write to one of these other streams and their stream disappears. Their pipeline disappears and they don't know why. And, that's what happened. There's a lot of gunk on my screen, but that's what happened here, right? The function printed ABC is cool, but it also consumed ABC. And so write host didn't have anything to do, or right, this one, right? It printed ABC is cool, but for each object didn't get an object. And so this write output didn't have anything to do. So yeah, always use write output. There's a saying in the PowerShell community that says every time you use out default, or anytime you use write host or something, a baby dies or something. I don't know. But that's why you will see in my script over and over and over, it should say write output, write output, write output. Although if I wanted this to be pipeable, it would probably say write console or something. There would be branching based on whether I was being run by a interactive user or not. But anyway, let's make progress with this now. So basically, I just have a welcome mat, right? And then I'm going into this loop. It's a lot easier to see this if we go into debug mode, right? And just like Bash, you can go into debug mode in VS Code or whatever. Looks like I've got a debugger built in. A debugger set up. Start debugging. Okay, gosh, that's ugly down there. So you could go in VS Code or whatever your favorite IDE is. It should be easy to get a PowerShell debugger. It was not that easy to get a Bash debugger, to be honest. It took a little more doing. But I also want to show you, PowerShell actually has debuggers inside of it. And it's not as good. Okay, so we'll go back to VS Code in a sec, I think. But there's two ways you can do this. One is there's a set PS debug command, and it asks if you want to trace, and this is a trace level. I'll say, yeah, I want to trace everything. And then here I say, I want you to step me through the code. Don't just dump the trace. I want to step through it one step at a time. And so if I do this, and then I call, get filtered files, right? And then it starts showing me, right, each of these and asking me, do you want to run this or not? And the default is yes. So all you have to do is hit enter. And then it starts stepping you in. Okay, the first thing is write output. Yeah, let's run that. Do you want to run this one? You say, yeah. And now you see the output of this one, right? Which has a much longer name because it's naming the alias now. It's giving me the value for the alias. That's why it's so long. Write output. And you can just keep saying yes, yes, while true. And here I'm removing a variable because remember I do an infinite loop. So I want to be safe and reset this response every time. And in PowerShell, this is the equivalent of that. Remember Bash has a -z test. And since Bash and Linux are so anti-verbose, right, you have to remember Z kind of stands for 0. And so if it says -z response, it means I'm going to run this until there's something in the response variable, and you kind of have to get used to it. Well, in PowerShell, you just say while not response. So as soon as something shows up in the response variable, this loop will exit. And so we're gonna continue with this prompt. What string should be there? That's why when I hit enter, it comes back. And it'll actually say if there's a response. Nope, there's not a response. So it goes back to the top of the loop. Is there a response? No. So it comes back and prompts me again, right? And I'll say txt this time. And now it's checking inside the loop. There's a redundant exit in here. I know I had surgery this week. You know, you'll cut me slack, right? So, but yeah, this could have been outside the loop. So I put asterisks around my filter. My loop sees that it can exit. And that's all. Now I have my filter. And if you want to kind of see what's going on, you see that suspend option there. I can hit S. That suspends me to a PowerShell prompt. So I can say like, what is my filter? And it'll say, oh, it's star txt star. And so you can come out here and look at what's going on interactively. So this isn't too terrible, given the fact that it's something that's built in. You can sort of interrogate things on the fly, and that's nice. When you're done poking around out here, I don't know if I have any. Did I already clear this? No, I didn't clear that yet, so that's still there. When you're done looking around out at that prompt, you say exit, and it returns you to the debugger. And I'm going to say no to all. You could say yes to all, and it would just keep running. I guess I could do that. That's more interesting. And now it's just doing the trace. It's just dumping everything, right? So I got rid of the step behavior. That's what this was, where it's stepping me through each command. Now, I have to, this is my menu up here, FLV. So I'll say F, and it shows me stuff, and I say, no, I'm done. So that's what that trace looks like. And that's kind of the basic trace. A lot of times that's all I have to do in PowerShell. To shut it off, I think this is an interesting command. Set PS debug, and the parameter is -off, and then it's done. You can also, and this is a little more powerful, I think. You can also set something called a PS breakpoint. And with PS breakpoint, you can set it for a script. So I could go ahead and put in this whole users, you know, Chris, go into GitHub, get the actual file name. But in this case, I think I can just put in the name of this alias, get filtered files. Yeah, let's try that. And you could put in a line number, but I want it from the top. So we'll see if this works. It's a little different than how I usually do it. Parameter set cannot be resolved. Now I have to explain parameter sets. Yay. So even though both command and line are valid parameters for this, PowerShell's smart enough to know something I don't know, which is you can't use them together. So I think when I say command, it just means whenever I run the command, I can't tell it. I can't tell it which line in the command. You use line with a script, though. If you name a file, you can say, I don't want the breakpoint to happen until line 72 or something like that. Let's see if this works. Cool. And so this is more of a, this debugger has a little bit more functionality. At first, you don't know what to do because there's no help. And so the first thing they tell you is that you can ask for help with H or question mark. And so if you do this, you have more options, and these are more like a normal debugger. You can step into your current command, meaning you want to go in and see more detail, or you can step over, just run this thing and land me on the next line. If you've stepped into something and you want to step out, I always think this is O for oops. I stepped into Microsoft's code or something that I just don't want to see. Continue means I'm done debugging, just keep running. Quit means I'm done debugging, just stop. detach in this sense, I never use this. So detach usually means you're going to let the process continue, but you don't need to debug it anymore. You can actually see the call stack from this debugger. And this one's important. List shows you context. Sometimes you get lost, like you're branching around all over the place and you're like, okay, great. I know that the next line is write output, quote, quote. That doesn't tell me a lot, right? And so you type L for list and it shows you the star. This is where you are, right? So, so now I can say, yeah, I want to, basically, I'm going to step into or step over these guys. So I'll say I want to step, and then it just starts showing me these. If I step into this one, it's going to start saying, okay, I need to evaluate the string as the next one. So this is a good one to step over. Just run the whole line and it'll show me this. Step over that one. I probably want to step into the loop. I'm going to remove this variable. I want that whole line to run while not response. We'll go ahead and step into this. We'll step over that one so it just runs the whole thing. Oh, that didn't work. That's okay. There's our prompt. Say txt. And now again, if I was lost, where's this if response coming from? I can do this and it'll show me you are right here, and it shows me enough context that I know what's going on. So this is nice. And if I let's see, response. If I want to know what response is here, I think I can just type it right there and it'll show me, right? And I think if can I change it actually? Oh, not like that. I think this is bash. Okay, so I can do that. And that should actually change my output, right? So I'll go ahead and tell it to continue. And you can see I got SHs because I changed the variable, right? So there are debuggers in bash, and now we have a recording of that. Or in bash, no. There are debuggers in PowerShell. And so now I've got a little bit of recording of that. And, you know, that's a heck of a lot nicer than setting -X in bash and watching all these commands fly by, some of which you didn't ask for, right? So meanwhile, back here. So let's look at kind of the same process over here. It almost looked nicer in PowerShell, didn't it? But the debugger for PowerShell in VS Code is a lot nicer than the one for bash because it'll actually pull up the local variables without you having to ask for them. Do you remember that in bash? That there would be local variables, and unless I went over and added a watch for them, it wouldn't show them, right? I had to specifically say, yeah, I really want to know what, you know, dollar filter is. But let's go ahead and run this here. We'll go a little more slowly. Oh, here we go at the top. So I'll step over these write output commands, and you can, where's my debug console? Output. No, terminal. Oh, that's no good. I see that it's interlacing output with an actual prompt here. I don't like that. I'm going to stop. It's not how it's supposed to look. Well, now I do kind of like the one in PowerShell better. This isn't supposed to keep showing this prompt over and over. But I want to stay in here because of the better view of the local variables. So I guess I will. Anyway. Okay, so we'll go ahead and let it write its output. And now we come into this infinite loop. And we'll go ahead and step into that. And we'll start talking about these individual commandlets and whatever. And the nice thing is that generally you don't have to think too hard about them, right? Remove variable is going to get rid of a variable. And does anybody remember, you can catch me in my first lie about PowerShell here. I said that, in Bash, when you assign a variable, you don't use the $sign, right? So if you're in Bash, you might say my var equals 1, but when you use it, you have to put the $sign in, right? And I said that in PowerShell, the $sign's always there. And look, I lied. You want to get rid of the variable called response, but you don't include the $sign. Why not? Can anybody figure that out?
Because if you put the $sign, it would use what the value of the variable, not the name of the variable.
Right. There's exactly right. You always have to be able to name an object, right? Yeah, I'm not going to go on that tangent, but yeah, that's exactly right. I'm naming the variable. I'm not referencing the variable. So whenever you reference a variable in PowerShell, it'll always have the $sign, whether it's being declared or being used. But here, when I'm naming the variable and saying get rid of it, I can't put the $sign there for exactly the reason Michael just said. In fact, you get, excuse me, I'm off this little guy. You get back an error message that makes perfect sense once you understand that. So if I say my var equals 1, this is Bash, I'm sorry, this is PowerShell now. And I say remove variable $my var, you get this, right? So that makes me wonder, do you think this will work? You think that'll get rid of the variable named my var?
Yes.
Only one way to find out.
Yeah, there's only one way to find out. It did. So remember, there's all these different concepts. So in PowerShell, they said, a drive that holds files is just a label that points to a hierarchical collection of something. And so they decided, why can't we have a drive just be a label that points at a hierarchical collection of something? And a simple hierarchy is a flat list. So they put a drive label on the list of variables. So that's why I'm looking here for any variable that starts with M, and my var is gone. Variable name will still be there though, for you folks that are always as curious as I am. So yeah, that's why you have to drop the $sign there. So remove variable response. That's just getting rid of that variable. Otherwise, this is going to have a tough time the second time around, right? If the user says, yeah, I'd like to do this again, and my last value of responses here is going to be while not response. Okay, we're done with that, right? It's just going to skip it because there'll already be something there. 2 greater than no. So in PowerShell, in Bash, right, we have dev null. So you say, echo whatever, and you send it to dev null, right? And dev null is our black hole that just says, yeah, I can take that, and it doesn't do anything with it. And in PowerShell, it's just this object called null. And so you can say an echo is an alias. You guys liked aliases last week, so that was kind of fun. But you can say, echo whatever, and you can send it to null, and it goes away. Our streams have numbers. I don't know. I don't think I pointed that out. I think it was about output streams. Yep. But streams have numbers. You can reference them by number like you do in Linux. And so what I'm doing here is sending the error stream to the abyss. And the reason I'm doing that, anybody, it's fun to ask you. It's fun to ask when you haven't seen it before, because that makes you think. I had to put this here. Why? Any idea why I had to put that there? This one's totally a guess, though. Here's a hint. Whoops, I keep wanting to, I'm going to end my shell here sometime. Here's a hint. What might happen if I do this?
Variable does not exist.
Yeah. Yeah, I found that out. I didn't know that would happen. So I tried this. Is there a force command? There is. Doesn't matter. Okay.
Variable
So
does not exist.
because in Linux, if you add the -F for force, the error message goes away. So I was hoping. So yeah, if you do this, you send the error message to null and everything's fine. I didn't check to see. Yeah, it still doesn't like the return code, but I didn't check the return code, did I? So I'm fine. So this removes the variable and doesn't care whether it succeeded or not. If I wanted to be bulletproof with this, there are a couple, probably the best way to do this would be if response, something like that, right? And I would get rid of that, right? So this should be clean. If I check for a response and then remove it, I can think of a couple other ways to do it. This one seems verbose, but I could either check for the thing and then remove it if it's there, or there are ways to make this better, but this was fast. And if this doesn't work as intended, the side effect is going to be that this while loop will get skipped because there will already be something there. So this isn't a professional grade solution, but it's a darn good solution. Now, PowerShell has something in common with Python, and it's not duck typing, although they do have. PowerShell has duck typing built in because you don't say this is a string; it just figures out it's a string. But in PowerShell, you can use strong typing and tell PowerShell that something is an int, or you can tell it that it's a system dot. You can tell it that it's any of the .NET types or any of the types that are available. You can explicitly tell PowerShell that that this is exactly what this thing is. But most of the time, you're using figure it out. This is an int, right? But one of the things it has in common with Python is that for Boolean or for true false Boolean comparisons, it has this concept of things being truthy, right? So let's see. What's that? True or false?
Darn it. What?
Don't you like starting with a trick question? This is a trick. Let's start with an easier one. How about that
What?
one?
Is this exit codes or is this values?
This is just an if statement. There's no. So this is just an
Okay.
if statement. So 12 is true because it exists and it's a real, it's a normal number, right?
You're scaring me.
Yeah. Well, lots of languages will do this. How about that string? Is that true?
True.
That's truthy.
It's
Yeah, that's
truthy,
true.
right?
Truthy.
Yeah. So now we get back to how about that one?
I don't know.
True. Ah, dang.
That one's false.
I've been
It's
wrong.
falsy. Yeah. That one's falsy.
I was worried this had to do with exit codes.
False.
Well,
That one's falsy.
yeah. It does have to do with exit codes because you might return this, but how about that one?
False.
Falsy.
Falsy. Wouldn't you love a language that had the keywords truthy and falsy? It could be distinct. You could have true, false, truthy, and falsy. How about that?
Huh?
That's,
Yeah.
I
It's
think
gonna
what
be
I
like-
I think what I meant was this.
I'm a one?
What?
Now this
What?
Here you're
What
like,
is
oh,
that?
that's ASCII art. That's an empty array.
Ah.
Signs the array operator in this case, and that's an empty one.
Hold on.
Okay.
If comma
that's
is a
dumb.
unary operator,
What's that?
if comma is a unary operator,
Yeah,
What
comma
does-
was wrong. I was in the wrong language. That was my fault.
what does comma do in an if statement if it has 0 after it?
I don't know. I was in the wrong language though, and I'm not gonna.
All right.
We'll talk about that at Chili's later or something. So the main point is if you're returning something from a function, for the love of all that's truthy, please return true or false. If it's supposed to be true or false, don't make somebody know this, right? For heaven's sake, don't make them know that quote is false. Just return true or false. I mean, if you're supposed to return a number, right? If you're supposed to return a string, return a string. If it's an empty string, it's on them. They should know how to handle an empty string. If they know that an empty string is falsy and they want to deal with that, that's fine. You return the right thing, but if you're returning Booleans, there are keywords. I mean, this should never confuse anybody, right? Oh, that's German. We'll go with that. It might confuse people because it's German, but if true, everybody will know that's true. If you return true, they'll know it's true. If you return false, they'll know it's false. So that's the whole point there. But in this case, I'm using this, and this time I'm not returning this, I'm using this, but I'm using if response because I know as the producer of this code, not as the consumer of return code, which Axel was kind of reading ahead in my mind. Well done. As the person using this code, I know that if response is a shortcut for if response exists and it's not not an empty string and not a null and not the integer 0. Oh, here's one. Because you're probably wondering this now. True or false?
That's what I thought.
Yeah, it's a string now, right? And it's not the empty string. So it doesn't matter what the contents of the string are. Otherwise, you might have said, oh my gosh, Chris, what if they type in a 0? Doesn't matter. Because it's a
That's
string.
in JavaScript.
Oh no, I don't. I've if you look at my GitHub profile, you will see that I have committed JavaScript to open source projects. I would like to assure you that it took a very long time. I have a lot of lines of JavaScript under my name. It's because it was a very large file. I changed 3 lines. And I had to change them because Gmail does not follow one of the RFCs for email, and Microsoft does. Think about that for a while. Usually think Google's the one that's going to follow the standards, but Microsoft was, and they had written the tool with Gmail as their exemplar, right? Well, write it for Gmail and then it'll work for everybody. But they wrote it for Gmail and then it didn't work for everybody. Anywho, so this is what's going on here, right? Once you know those little details, I think the rest of it reads. They have a read host, which is a lot like the read-p that we used in bash, right? Read-prompt, except here we don't have to look up what -p means because it's -prompt. What strings should be used, blah, blah, blah. And then if we get a response, we wrap the filter around it and we're done, right? And then I remove this response variable again, because at some point I'm going to reuse it. Looks like I'm just being proactive. That should probably be down here. Yeah, close enough. And then I do the same thing again, but this menu wasn't very hard to build on my own. I looked at, there are PowerShell modules you can install that will build menus for you that look a little nicer. But with this one, I just wrote these lines to output. Well, these lines, right? That's my menu. Oh, wait, that's why that line was up there. It must have made it look nice. See, now I've got to figure out where it was. Hang on, Control Z. Oh no, never mind. I was right. So I write these lines to output, and that builds the menu. The visible part of it. And I'm going to do this. This is called a command block. And it means that there won't be individual prompts in between. So I just put it in curly braces with an ampersand in front, which is an execution operator. I don't even think I need it there, but that's how I do it. So this becomes the menu, right? The menu just looks like that. And in this case, I was kind and I hard-coded the whole thing. Remember when we were learning, I'm going to try to put the strings where they belong because it just makes it lots easier to read. And then I just used is this a switch statement? While true, read a response. Oh, no, just while true, I'm prompting them for a value. If it's one of the values I want, I break. And if it's not, I put an error message down and it sends them back to the top of the loop, and that's it. And let's grab this whole thing. That's it, I think. And I'll do the code block thing again. And so that looks pretty reasonable. And I tell them, I want X. And it says, no, you don't. And it just keeps doing that. And, for a build it yourself kind of thing, that wasn't very hard to do. And it didn't look terrible, right? I think that what's the variable name? Response, right? What did I don't have a value for response because code blocks have their own scope. So I got the value response in here, but as soon as the code block ended, it went out of scope. So I could redo it and print but we know it turned into, well, here, let's do it just so you can see it. Whoops. And this time I'll just pick one and it'll show you that I got my, whatever I typed ended accepted was the thing that wound up in the variable. Right? So then I just used a switch and I said, you know, this is where I probably should have put, you know, something like an else clause, you know, else I hate you, you know. You know, this is the one they shouldn't be able to get at, but usually I always say, yeah, I should put something there. Because if I, you know, if all of a sudden I say, you know, X is okay, I don't have anything down there to handle X. But like I said, it's not bulletproof code at this point. So for my sort field, you know, depending on which one they pick, I just went ahead and hard coded. If they said F, I'm going to have a field called name, and that's the one I want to sort on. If it's L, I'm going to have one called name length. If it's V, I'm going to have one called name vowel count, right? And then, so that's, you know, that's it basically. Now I've got, what do I have? I have their filter, which on my demos would be the thing that's star text star, right? I have a sort field based on whether they typed FL or V. That's one of these three values. And should be ready to go. And let me, so in my case, let's get out here, filter. It's gonna be like that. We just don't have that, so I'm gonna have to enter it. And that is the command I gave. It's basically a dir command. I'm in the wrong spot. Over here. There it is. This is the, I didn't do this though, did I? I want to use, I probably should use single quotes around that so that the stars won't expand into file names or anything. There we go. So the basic dir command, and yeah, dir is an alias. If you wanted to type it shorter when you're interactive, you could say dir filter so-and-so. And the shortest form, what you usually see people do interactively, right, is to just do that. It's the same thing. We get out our txt files, right? So that's all I'm running inside this subshell, right? $, paren, and then there's a get child item command, and then there's an end paren. So that's a subshell that returns a group of file info objects. Remember, those are .NET objects, or they're the metadata. Well, no, that's all objects are, their metadata. So then I go ahead and loop through them, right, for each file in that list. And let's go ahead and copy just the start of that. So same thing, but it's got the command embedded inside of it. And if you were, this is how I proof that I've got my loop structure right. I should get the same thing out, right? Because I'm just going to list these files. And PowerShell has this spiffy way. I don't know why or how it does it, but if I only have one type of object that I'm referencing here, and I'm not doing anything with it, it'll build a nice little table of it for me. So it looks pretty much exactly like I had called get child item. But if I wanted to be totally sure that I was the one in charge here, you could do something like write output, and then I see a file named, and then you could say, oh, I'm going to have to explain this. I'm going to do this the easy way for a second. Sorry. Easier to read way. That's right. And then you know that it's actually your code that's running. Yeah. So this is just me testing. Okay, the for loop is working, or for each loop. And Axel, you noted, I believe, that for each and for each object are both aliases. I wanted to point
No,
this
for
out to
each
you.
is the alias, and for each object is the correct one.
Gotcha, but I don't think you can do this. They reference the same object, but they have different semantics. So when you're saying for each something in list, you have to use for each. But when you pipe output to it, you say for each object. FYI. Does that make sense? So when it's for
You
each,
miscapitalized that, but yeah,
I miscapitalized what?
for each object.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
Yeah, here. It'll still be the same.
I
So
see.
if it's for each dollar widget in widgets or whatever, right?
Mhm.
That has to be the for each syntax. But if it's get widgets, then you have to say for each. I'm sorry. I'm just drawing a blank. Then you have to say for each object. So FYI. But anyway, back to this. So we've got our loop. We'll come back over here. And inside the loop, I'm calculating I did this vowel count in two sections. We looked at this last week, but we didn't record it. Yay. So I'm going to walk through this again, and it's worth walking through a couple of times. The vowel count is the hardest one, but you could loop through this, right? You could loop through and say, is the C a vowel? No. Is the H vowel? No. Is the R? Hey, the I is a vowel. There's one. Here's the second one. There's a third one, and you get the three out. And so you could do that, and that's fine. It's just a loop through one string, and it's pretty easy to do. One way you can do it that I showed you because it exposed a couple things that PowerShell can do is that there's this there's a command called I want to give it an actual file name instead of a first name. There's a command called select string that we looked at last week. But you can say, I want to take an input object. There are different things you can feed into this. You can print text and then stream it into select stream, but I've got an object here, this file name, whoops. And I can give it a pattern. And in this case, we're using a regex, regular expression. And the regular expression we want to use is the set of vowels. And so in regular expressions, if you put something in square brackets, it means I want to match one of these things that's inside this bracket. And for right now, I'm just going to do that. We'll build this up. And you can see that select string picked one of those things, right? It didn't go on to the E or the second E, it just picked one. And so it's like, okay, that's cool. There's also this other parameter called all matches, which will get it to select all three of those, right? Now, if we look at what this is, I usually type GM, but what's coming out of this get member, is that it's producing something called match info. So there's more information here other than a string with 3 highlighted letters in it, right? And match info has this object called matches in it. So let me back up to this command and ask, hey, what's in matches? And matches actually has, all three of these matches in it. It's got the A and the E and the second E, and it tells you that the first, let's see, what's our string? So it should be at 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8. So you can see the first one is at index 0, the second one is at index 4, and the third one's at index 8. And they all have a length of 1, which makes sense because I didn't ask for more than 1, right? I said match 1 vowel for me. Now, the nice thing about this is that there's 3 of them, and that's the answer to our question, right? How many vowels are there? 3, Chris, there are 3. And one of the things about this matches object, we just dumped it, but if we look at its members, look, it has a length. I don't know why sometimes there's a length and sometimes there's a count. I'm just the messenger. But if we dump that in here, 3, that's the answer to our question. So sometimes you have to build these things up piece by piece, right? You say, okay, I'm looking for vowels. No, dang it, I'm looking for all the vowels. Now I want to see the matches. Oh, the matches has a count attached to it, and you eventually get to the answer. But this is easy to do in PowerShell, again, because of the discoverability, right? We started off, you would have gone to Google or someplace, or you might have even said, what can I do with strings? Right? And saw this. It's like, oh, I can select. I wonder what I can select in a string. You might have even stumbled across it that way. And then you go in and you look at the help for select string, or you just type select string and you hit a hyphen and you start going through the parameters to see which ones look interesting. The help file is recommended, but to be honest, I use the hyphen pivot a lot. And you just start building it up. And again, to do that without all the gunk in between, pattern was, let's see, input object, file name. And then the pattern was AEIOU. Because you looked someplace and found out you can search a file name with a regex, and you looked up enough about regex, or you already knew regex, and you said, that's how I find a vowel. And you got this out. And you said that only highlighted the first one. How do I find all of them? And maybe all you did was this. And then you saw all of a sudden jumping out of the page, oh, all matches. That sounds promising. And then that happened. And then then you had to do a little bit more work, but eventually you saw that there was, matches. And then you saw that there was essentially a count. You just kept discovering more, and you eventually got to where this is the answer. It's a little bit simpler than what I had. So I think I threw in a capture group that you don't need. But if you look at that and you come back over here, I used count. Does count work also? It does. Select string input object. I use I don't have file name in its own parameter. Pattern, all matches, matches.count. So it's the same thing, just busted into 2 lines because probably because I was editing it in exactly this layout and I was going to go off the right side of my screen, right? So that gets me the vowel count. Basically, that's it. But after that, here's some magic you probably wouldn't stumble on your own. Well, you can have a raisin bash, but yeah. $Dan. We're going to make you an object, Dan. There's this type called PS custom object, and it's called a type accelerator because what it lets you do is make a PowerShell object without working very hard at it. And so,
At least I'm a custom object.
yeah, you are. There is a PS object, but this is a way to turn basically a hash array into a PS object. And so you can say, Dan's first name, well, it's actually Daniel, we know. And I think you might not even need the commas or anything. And then the middle initial, is it S?
That's
Doesn't
correct.
matter. Yeah, I'm only trying to go off things. I'm not trying to dox you. These are things I've seen. Um, and we know, right? Something like this. And then you go ahead and do that.
I thought I was still in training.
No, I don't think so. But then if you ask what Dan is, I'm not going to show it to you just yet. If you ask what Dan is, it says he's a PS custom object, and he has, these are actual properties on this object now. And excuse me. And if you say, hey, show me, Dan, it'll actually show it like it's a PowerShell object. I mean, it's just like it's a hash table, but now we've seen these note properties before, right? This basically lets us create an object that they attach the very most basic PowerShell object methods to it, and they let you create your own properties. So what I did, and that's let's see. What I did was create an empty array. So you thought that was just a random thing I threw in. An empty array, the ASCII art. It's falsy right now. And then you can say people plus equals Dan, right? And then I can say, pick on the teachers here. Well, here. That's going to be easier. And my last name is Leonard. The middle initial is A for Alan. And since we said Daniel, we use my full first name. Whoops, I said Dan. That part's got to change. There we go. And so now there's another one of these floating around. And I can add to this one, plus equals, Chris. People plus, hold it. What am I doing differently? Files plus, do I have to, hang on. It'll come to me. What did I do to people? I might not have done what I expected to here. So I didn't start the people array the way I expected to before. No, okay, hang on. Start people over. Let's go get Dan. Oh, that was weird. People plus equals that. Oh, that's me. Okay. And then oh, I'm not doing this right. This is disappointing. It's okay. This one works. Put a break point on this somehow. So what happens though is that I can go ahead. Oh, I really want that to work out there. Did I forget the @ sign? No. I have another idea. Aren't you enjoying this? They're not colons. No, okay. I think this is it either. Some little syntaxy thing I'm doing wrong. People plus equals, that's Dan. And we'll just, I want to be faster this time. So, of course, there's one problem here. Yeah. Okay. As you guys know, we had a bit of an issue on Saturday. And when I say we, I mean me, where I could not demonstrate something in PowerShell that I wanted to show you guys with arrays of PS custom objects. So I wanted to come back and demonstrate that for you. I wonder if this is still in my buffer anywhere. That would be awesome. This shouldn't be like that. It should be this. So if we got Dan, and we've got, well, that's nice. I spelled it wrong. Spelled my own first name wrong, but I also gave my ID to Dan. This should be me, right? My first name is Christopher, middle name A, middle initial A, and so on. And I was the benevolent dictator. I don't know what de jure means. De jure, I think it means because somebody made me that way. I'm going to go back and fix Dan. He's not just, I guess, he is the benevolent dictator. What did I call him last time? I said forever. And he said he thought he was in training. So I'll say that Dan's the benevolent dictator forever in training as that. Then we both get what we want. But definitely I need to change his last name is Tice, his middle initial is S, as we discussed, and first name is Daniel. So now we've got Dan, looks like this, Chris looks like that, and we can access individual fields, like Dan, last name is Tice, and Chris dot middle initial is A, right? But we can't get at these at the same time or in a collective manner because these are just individual variables. But the nice thing about this in PowerShell, if we put variables into an array, we can do some interesting things. So I'm going to say that people is an array, okay? And I'm going to put, Dan and Chris, the variables Dan and Chris, into the same array. And now if I look at people, you can see I have an array with both variables in that array. So this is interesting now because I can do things in looping, for example, that look like this for each person in people do. And then I can say, let's see, write output, the current person is, and then I can say, person dot first name, space, person dot last name. And then we'll close that off, and we'll get the output like this. I can also do things that you might not expect from other languages. PowerShell gives you access to individual fields. As we saw, you can say person 0, which is Dan, dot last name is, whoa, that's weird. Oh, this is not an ordered array? Let's see here again. Sorry, I said person, not people. That's my mistake. So people dot last name is 0. People 0 dot last name is Tice, because This is an array, and it's keeping its same order. When I asked for person 0 last name, well, person was the index variable for this array, and it stayed on its last value, which was me, right? So that's why I got my own last name out. And then I could say, so I say people 0 dot last name is Dan, and I can say people 1 dot last name is is Leonard. But something you can do in PowerShell that might surprise some people is that I can just say, what are the people last names? And I can get them both out. That's not very common behavior. Also, if I had other people, for example, let's see here. For each, let's say for each, and I'll just say for each word in, and I'll say 3, 4, 5. Let's create additional people, okay? So we'll say $person equals, and now we want a PS custom object, right? And it's going to be a hash array. So it should have a first name that is equal to, say the first name is person, the last name is whatever the word is, so it'll be like person 3, person 4, person 5, the middle, initial, doesn't matter, so we'll just say it's X. What else do we need? Title. The title is fake person. And I need to close off my array, and I need to close off code block. Let's see if that works. All right. So now if I look at people, oh, look what I forgot to do. After that, I need to add each of these people to the people array. So I'm going to say people, we want to add into that this current person. Okay, so now if I look at people, I have person 3, person X3, person X4, and person X5, all fake people. So now this is interesting. In PowerShell, I can do things like, I can say I want to see people 0, 2, and 3, and it'll do that for me. 0, 2, and 3 being the first, third, and fourth people, right? So this is person 0, 2, and 3, and that works fine. I can say I would like to see people 0 to 2 and 4. So that should get me the first, second, third, and fifth, everybody but person 4. Oops. Index expression is not valid. Oh, I disagree. What did I do wrong? There we go. Wrong language again. Oh, I thought you could do this, mix and match. But I can say 0 to 2, and it'll pull off the first, second, third people in the array. I can say that I want to see the last person in the array. Well, one way you can do that is to say I want people.count -1, and that'll pull off person 5, because that'll count -1 is 4, and so that's the fourth index. That's kind of annoying. So instead, I can just go count -1. I can leave off the people.count part and just say, okay, that works. And I can keep going. This is count -2 and count -3 and so on. Count -4, count -5. So the count is 5 and count -5 is 0. So 0 is Dan. What if I do this? Huh. Yeah, nobody there, right? What if I do this? Nobody there, but no error. It actually is a null entry in the index, and so it returns null. So these are the PS custom objects I was trying to show you the other day. If you look at one of these, let's pull it right from the array. If you look at, we'll pull down. If we look at one of these and look at their methods and properties, you'll see that each of these properties we've added, they're listed as note properties, and sometimes note properties can be tricky, but in our case, they're just strings, and since this is an individual object, they've been listed here. So that's what we've got here for PS custom objects. They're very nice. They let you build objects that can do a lot of things that any object in PowerShell can do. For example, I can say that I want to sort these by last name, and that just works. I can sort by any of the columns, right? Fits Windows like a glove, fits programming pretty much like a glove. You can run PowerShell in Linux, and it is reasonably useful. I don't think it's going to replace Bash or ZSH or anything like that anytime soon. But that's what we've got. So there's my little rundown of PS custom objects and arrays of PS custom objects. But what this lets you do is build up an array of these objects. And I am just going to drop a breakpoint here, and I will show this to you. So continue. We weren't already there, were we? String, txt, file name. What did I do wrong? Oh, sorry. I'm in a different directory. So be down here. We'll just tell it to show all the files. Okay. Then we'll do this vowel search. And on our locals now, what's it called? Files. So files now has this that's not it. Oh, that might actually be a file in this one. Let's keep going and see if we get anything that looks reasonable. And let's get rid of, let's add a second breakpoint right there. So now you can see it's building up this array, right? With these different file names. Because apparently the syntax in here is correct. Have a couple more. And the nice thing about this that I wanted to show you is that this is a PowerShell object, and the punchline of this thing, I'm sorry I couldn't set it up out there, is that I can do things like say files, and then I can say sort object, and I can say I want to sort this on the name length, and then I'm done because it's a PowerShell object, right? I want to sort this on the name vowel count, and I'm done because it's a PowerShell object. So I get all the stuff that PowerShell objects can do, but as I'm adding this in, because I'm using this PS custom object, it's this type accelerator, PowerShell's turning them into PowerShell objects for me. So I can do all the stuff with them that I can do with a PowerShell object. And a lot of the PowerShell commandlets you use will build PS custom objects. So if you go and pipe them to get member, you'll see that they're not file system objects or file info objects or directory info objects necessarily. A lot of times they're PS custom objects that just have lots of these properties. So you're like, okay, I know what to do with them, and you might not even notice that they're custom objects. Oh, I guess we already looked at this, right? So in this case, you might see this, and you're like, oh, I can use this. You don't really pay attention to what it is. So anyway, this is the first thing about PowerShell. This is not obvious, right? This isn't something you just discover through, get command or something like that. But this is really powerful, because if you write a commandlet, if you write a script like the one I've written, but instead of doing this at the end of your script, where you present objects, you do what I did with Bash and just dump a bunch of text on the screen. That's kind of rude to the next caller, right? Because now they've got a bunch of text to cut through, and that's not the way PowerShell works. But if you do this and you create custom objects, now you're handing the next person objects, right? And that's the PowerShell thing to do. So this script's a little different because it's interactive, right? PowerShell scripts usually will take things like your sort order and your filter. Those will be input parameters. And if you don't supply them, PowerShell will typically behave like this. Now I have talked past my brain's think ahead buffer. I have to think of a commandlet now. So I have a when my CPUs start running a little hot, I have a couple commandlets I wrote. They require elevation. They're just the first two that came to mind. So point being, they won't be on yours, but they'll illustrate the point, I think. So one is called get process priority. And I have a hard-coded list of processes that I can override. But these are the typical offenders: my browsers, my file sync like Dropbox and one, whatever Microsoft's is called. Windows search should be on here someplace. It's apparently not running right now. OneDrive is what I couldn't think of. And you can see all the priorities above normal, some are idle. And when things are getting really bad, I look at temperature, in Task Manager. And if things are just slow and my fan's going more than I want it to do, and I look in Task Manager and too many things are running hot, I'll come out here. This is my commandlet to look at their priorities, but I'll come out here and I have another one that will set their process priorities. And if I just run this, it will say, what priority do you want? Now, the reason it does this, set process priority, is that there are two parameters here, three, sorry. Process list has a default list. It's these guys. Some of them don't show up, but I have a default list. It's different on each of my computers, but there's a default list of targets that if you don't tell me what to go after, I know what to go after. The one for silent defaults to off. I'm going to show you what I'm doing, but there's no default for priority, right? I've got there's a set list that you have to pick from, but I don't default to anything. So you have to provide that one. If you don't provide it, this is what PowerShell usually does. So instead of being interactive by default, you'll get something like this, right? And then you can say below normal, and then it takes off and it shows you, in this case, since I didn't say silent, it says, here's what they used to be and here's what they are now. So that's PowerShell's default approach to interactivity. And the idea is that what I should do is not just dump this to the screen as a bunch of text. I should be returning this to the screen as a bunch of PowerShell objects that contain these process objects. So that if I pipe this to something else, that next step will have access to the processes I changed. Make sense? Yes? I want to pass the objects along. That's the cheap way to say it. If this is just text, I'm not doing my job right, kind of. But that's only if I want to make something that can go along the pipeline, right? Specifically. But if you're making a script or commandlet, you want to ask yourself that question: should this thing produce output that can go along the pipeline? If it can, then instead of being interactive, you should use parameters. So because this one right now, no way this is going to work with the pipeline unless I do a lot of mucking with it, because there's too much interactivity. So anyway, that's why the, let's see, after all, so once I get this into, this is the equivalent of in Bash, I used a temp file, right? But once I get this into this object that has its own methods and everything, that's why this time there really is almost nothing left to do. I don't even need this format table auto size thing. If I get rid of that, you're not going to see much of a difference. Let's come back out here. I think I was in this shell. Sorry, Zoom's in my way. There we go. So we'll say, show us all, what folder am I in? Yeah, show us everything. Hold it. What happened? Remember when I moved some lines around? I think I goofed something up. So that's funny. Okay, I goofed something up, but this is what it looks like with that format that I threw in there. Is only going to matter if the screen is like compressed or something. Did I say wide? Auto size. I don't even think I need that. What did I move around though that made that break? Doesn't matter. I'll put it back. I've got yesterday's commit, right? So that's funny. I don't know what it was, and it doesn't matter too much. I'll fix it before I'll fix it and make sure the correct version is up on GitHub. So I mean that's why with this again, the idea is for whichever shell you're in, it's really nice if when you get to the place where you're supposed to produce your output should be pretty well ready to go. I've lost the line that produces it here. This one, because it got shorter, right? Show me my files variable and sort it. Done. And in PowerShell, it just winds up looking a lot nicer because it automatically puts the headers on and makes them green, which is nice. But yeah. So that's how this works. We're over time, I just noticed, and that's that. So sorry about that. Sitting here in my recliner, time just it just comes to a stop, So
It's all good.
yeah. And I know you guys would have spoken up. I trust you would have spoken up if you needed to drop. So I'll fix this. I've got a second version that I might release that puts all the menu logic into an array, kind of like I did with Bash, or it puts it into a hash table, so that the menu will generate itself and know how to sort based on what's in the hash table for people that kind of want to see a little bit more like what it would what it would look like to separate the config away from the logic, which is a step toward making it more bulletproof or whatever. But, for our purposes, something like this where all the strings are where they're used is fine, right? So hope you've enjoyed our little tour through PowerShell and Bash. I think this is about where we drop it, but I'm happy we've had time this year to look at these, just to at least get a taste for them, so that if we have to look at them later, they won't be totally foreign. And if we wind up looking at a different scripting language, well, third one's easy, right? So yeah, that was kind of the goal. Next week, I'm hoping to start looking at services that we're likely to see at the competition. We're at January 0.5 right now. And I don't have the date memorized for the competition, but probably end of April. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Anybody
usually.
know? Yeah. So we're at 1.5. We've got until 4.5. So we've got about 3 months. There's a couple holidays in there, Easter's in there. Is there another big one? There's Memorial Day's after, right? So, but there's spring break. That's the other big one. So, we'll have enough time. We'll try to do a service every week or two. We'll try to, comment on Windows. It's really just such a crapshoot with Windows and Linux.
I just looked it up, April 20.
Okay, thanks. So April 20. Historically, Linux has been far more prevalent, but we've seen 2 competitions in the last 3 years out of 4 total that have used Windows. So we need to try to be a little bit ambidextrous with that. So we'll see. We'll figure out some way to do that. That's asking a lot to have a team get ready for both. But yeah, we'll figure it out. It'll be easy. We'll do perfect. It'll be great. Yeah.